Ask you this morning, how many of you like to share good news? Right? No one? Okay. Well, that's good to hear. No, I mean, seriously, I remember when we found out that we were, Emily was pregnant. Go ahead and turn me down just a little bit. Thank you. We found out that Emily and I were pregnant with Nate. I didn't know. And we weren't pregnant. She was. And we didn't know it was Nate. We just knew it was this cute little bean right there, right? And at the time, Emily was, she's a labor and delivery nurse and done that for years. And all the people on her floor had to get certified in ultrasound. So they had to practice as a part of that. And so we have like hundreds of ultrasound pictures of Nate. And I was so excited, right, to our first kid, all the pictures. And I'd tell anyone, I'd show you, and I didn't know what it was, this little black and white little thing, right? But I'd show the clerk at the gas station. I told all my friends. I told all my family. I told everyone that I could that we were going to have a baby and how excited I was. And here's the deal. I get home one day and Emily's like, hey, how does everyone know that I'm pregnant? I go, well, I told them, right? Because it's good news. And she goes, hey, we're like 6 weeks into this thing. You may want to simmer down just a little bit, right? I didn't know you're supposed to wait to 12 weeks. I didn't know that was a rule. No one told me the rule. My first kid, and I just like sharing good news. We like to talk about things that we love, don't we? And it can be like you're excited about something. I remember when we, years ago when I was pastoring in Connecticut, I had just moved up there and, just sort of getting adjusted to life in a new state, a new area. And I see someone with a Longhorn shirt on. And man, listen, for some of you, I know that's like bad, but for me, that's really good. That's my team. And I go up to them and I start talking about it. And that was at a time when the Longhorns could win games. We can't do that now, but we could back then. And so we were talking about the upcoming season and everything else. And I get done and Emily goes, did you know him? I'm like, no, but I do now, right? Because we have something in common and we love to share and talk about and tell people about things that are important to us. As a church, there's something that we talk about often, right? In fact, it's a part of our mission statement. It's a part of every ministry that we have. It's in the go-to focus that we have, and that's that we believe that as Christians, that one of the best things that we can do is what we call declaring the good news, to telling other people about Jesus. If you've been around here much, you have heard us talk about it. And I even had someone recently go, Stephen, why do you talk so much about that? Why do you talk so much? Why is it so important that we tell others about Jesus? And here's the truth. We don't do it because it's some cool thing to do, and we don't talk about it because we want to just grow our church and have a bigger church because, it's because more people means better, right? That's not what we're trying for. We do this and we talk about this because I truly believe that God's Word teaches us that we were all created to declare. In fact, we're spending some time looking at the Sermon on the Mount, the longest recorded sermon that we have of Jesus. This time relatively early in his ministry, when he gets on a literal mount and sits down and he starts talking and he tells people, as we looked at in the first week, that here's what you need to do if you want to build a life on me, a life that withstands the storms that we all face. He says, here's some things that you need to do. And then as we looked at last week, he gave us these attitudes and reminding us that guys, look, we don't fit in this world, right? As Christians, this world is not our home, and because it's not our home, sometimes it's full of difficulty, and sometimes it's full of challenges, and sometimes it just feels like we're being persecuted. Now, here's the thing: whenever life is hard, whenever you experience pain, whenever you feel like you're being persecuted, what's our natural first response? It's to take care of ourselves, isn't it? To look at ourselves. Man, this hurts. I need to do something about it. This isn't what I want. I need to fix it. This isn't going the way that I planned. I need to figure out a new plan. I need to figure out what to do. And when life hurts or when something hurts, right? Let me drop a hammer on your little toe and tell me what you're going to be thinking about. Whenever one of my kids comes up up to me and says, hey, Dad, my arm hurts. I go, let me punch you in the side, and they won't hurt anymore. And I don't punch my kids. Don't think that. But, right, I mean, it's like the whole thing, right? What you're focused on is what hurts, is what doesn't feel good and what's wrong. And so what Jesus is going to tell us today is something radically different. Because he's saying, look, I know the world's hard. I know sometimes it's difficult. And I know that sometimes it feels like it's full of pain. And I know sometimes it even feels like you are being persecuted, and probably because you are. But he says, rather than focusing on yourself, rather than turning inward, I want you to know that it's in those moments that we have the honor and the privilege of declaring the good news to people. In fact, if we'll take our eyes off ourselves and put it on others, we might be surprised how quickly the pain goes away. So I want to read to you here in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 13. And here's what it says. It says, now this is talking to all of the followers of Jesus. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. So Jesus is telling us that we are salt, that as his followers, as his children, we are salt and we are light. And so what that means is that we need to be salty. And that doesn't mean grumpy old men. Some of y'all got that down well. That's not the kind of salty that Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about, right, he uses the example of salt, sodium, right? If you some of y'all remember having to memorize the periodic table, and Na, right, stands for, some of y'all are doing it right now, like, oh, you're having flashbacks. I get it, right? And I thought about putting salt on my food, but then I thought, nah. Anyway, come on, that was good. Come on, don't you get to, yeah, Frank, you love it, don't you, Frank? That's why I love you, Frank, right? Because that's a dad joke right there. But listen, in the time of Jesus, when Jesus was alive, very few people used salt for taste. And I know that we probably take in too much salt in our world. I get it. But if you've ever had like saltless ketchup or saltless anything, it's pretty nasty, isn't it? And we like the taste of salt, and we use a lot of it in our world, but they wouldn't use it for that. In fact, salt had something that was significantly more important to them, because they didn't have refrigeration, or they didn't have freezers. They didn't have ways to preserve meat. So one of the best ways that you could preserve your meat, your food, was to pour salt on it, let it dry it out, and then it would last long. It wouldn't last forever, but it would last longer, and you could use it for trips. You could use it to not have to waste quite as much as you would otherwise. And so when they heard this, they didn't think salt like flavor. They thought salt like preservative. In fact, it was so valuable, salt was so valuable, that you would get paid in salt sometimes. Rome would pay their soldiers in salt. Rome would pay other people in salt. In fact, there's a phrase that we have, worth your salt, right? Worth the amount that we're paying you. What you're doing is worth what we're giving you. And so here we have Jesus saying, not I want you to be or try to be. He's saying you are the salt of the earth. You know what he's saying? This world is rotting. You know that, don't you? You don't need me to tell you, turn on the news, right? He's saying the world is rotting, and as children of God, you make the world better. Just by being a follower of Jesus. Listen, this isn't something he's saying you even have to try to do. He's saying that if you were actively following Jesus, if you were doing the things that he did and living the life that he lived in and living the life that he called you to live, he says the natural result of that is that you will be like salt. You will make this world better. Think about the things that Jesus did when he loved people who are not easy to love. You make the world better. When you build up others, when the world tends to tear other people down, you make the world better. When you meet real needs like Jesus did, like feeding people and healing people, he says, just like Jesus made the world better, you'll make the world better. When you value people the way Jesus did, where you see every person as created in the image of God, you make the world better. And what Jesus is telling us here is that as Christians, Our very presence should make this world better. So here's the question, does it? Would our neighborhood be disappointed if we moved because we make it so much better? Would our job go, hey man, you know what, we'll do anything to keep you around because you just make this place better? Does our family look at you and go, man, listen, you make our family better, you make our friends better, you make this whatever it is better just by your presence, just because you're living and following and reflecting Jesus. In fact, he says something in there. He says that if salt loses its saltiness, it's really not good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled by men. And the crazy part about that, and Jesus knew this, right? Salt's an element. It can't be unsalty, right? It's either salt or it's not salt. So how does salt loses its saltiness? It gets corrupted. It gets mixed in with a bunch of other stuff. No matter how good your salt is, if you mix it with a bunch of dirt, it's not really good for being salt anymore. Your meat's not preserved, it's just dirty. And no one wants that. My wife likes fancy salt. Right? I didn't know there's a kind of different kinds of salt, but there's apparently, so we get salt from the Himalayas and we get salt from the Red Sea. And I don't know why we pay that much money for salt, because that little blue container right there that you can shake, that works for me, but we like fancy salt. And here's the thing, is that fancy salt is just like every other salt. It's just more expensive unless it's been corrupted, unless it's been mixed with something else. And then no matter what you have, no matter where it comes from, no matter how high of a price you paid, and Jesus paid a high price for you, didn't he? He says you mix it with a bunch of junk, and it's really not worth anything anymore. It's a harsh statement that he's saying, and it's a reminder to us that how much do we allow this world to influence us rather than how much do we influence this world. We got to live here. We got to work here. We got to have friends here. We got to do all the things that life is. But we're either doing one of two things. We're either making the world better or we're allowing the world to corrupt us. And Jesus is going, are you allowing the world to corrupt you? Are you getting sucked into the junk of this world? Are you getting pulled into all the things that this world says important that have nothing to do with what God says is important? Are you focused more on the temporary things of this world? Are you living your life for the eternal? Are you trying to fit in? Are you trying to follow Jesus? Because he says when you follow Jesus, you are the salt of the world and you make this world a better place. So he tells us to be salty, but he also tells us to shine bright. Why is light important? Because if you don't have it, you run into things. You ever try to walk through the room in the middle of the night when it's dark and you hit your toes and you say, thank you, Jesus, the whole time, or something close to that, right? You ever drop something behind something that's really dark and you're like yelling at your kid to hold the flashlight still so you can find whatever it is that you're looking for, just hypothetical, right? You ever done any of that? You know how important light is when you don't have it. I mean, about a year ago, some of you were without light, weren't you? And you're going like, dude, it was like you go to bed at like 4:30 in the evening, because what else are you going to do? Because you can't see anything. And so we need light, because without light, we can't see. And Jesus says, not only are you to be salt, he says that you are to be light. And here's the thing that they understood that I don't know if we do, because for us, light's easy, relatively speaking, right? You walk into a room and you flip on a switch and you expect, right, because you paid your bill, you expect your lights to come on, and if it doesn't, you get upset, don't you? You get angry, and you don't even really like stress if it gets left on a little bit longer than maybe it should, unless you're like me and like a dad who walks through the house the other night, and like every single light is on in my house. Like we had lights on, I didn't even know they worked. I thought that lamp was for decoration, but apparently it actually works, and every single light, and I'm turning off lights, and I'm saying happy words the whole time underneath my breath, right? Just like, darn kids. I don't even know who did it. I probably did it, but I'm blaming them because that's what dads do. And Emily goes like, how old of a dad are you? And I'm like, just turn off the lights, right? Just get going, because I don't want to waste it, right? I'm doing the whole thing. It's like, hey, don't waste the electricity. You know, one day we'll turn it on and it won't be there. And you're like, yeah, but today it's there and we're thankful for it. But to them, here's the thing. Light was not just flipping a switch. Light was a little lamp, sometimes the size of your hand, that you poured oil in, and oil that wasn't easy to find, and oil that wasn't cheap, and so you didn't really want to waste it. And Jesus is saying, why you would never pour your oil and put it on the lamp and light the lamp and then take that light and put it under a basket. You wouldn't waste it that way. You wouldn't take the time, the energy, the money to do it and then to just waste it, right? He's saying that you take a light, what you do with the light is that you light the lamp and then you lift it up high so that everyone in the house can see. They can see where they're going, they can see what they're doing, they can see whatever it is that they need to see. And he says that's the only use for a light is to lift it up high. And Jesus here is saying that you are not just here to make this world better, you're here to be a light, not a light that shines in the eyes of people and hurts them, but a light that says, let me show you the way to healing. Let me show you the way to forgiveness. Let me show you the way to life. Last Sunday we looked at the Beatitudes and we looked at all these things that we face as people, being worn out, being broken, being humbled and lowered below other people, missing our purpose and meaning in life, the relationships that are fall apart and that are broken, feeling like we're being beat up. And what Jesus is saying as he's following this is like, guys, I know this world is hard, but you know what you get to do as Christians? You get to make the world just a little bit better. And while you're making it a little bit better, you get to point the way to the ultimate answer, and his name is Jesus. He says, let your light shine. Let your light shine so that the world looks at you and goes, there's something different about them, and I want what they have. The challenge is not that our light is not there. If we're a follower of Jesus, doing what Jesus wants us to do, we have a light. The problem is that sometimes we like to cover it up because, well, it's easier to blend in than to shine bright. Right? It's easier to blend in, to fit in, to do what everyone else is doing, just to go with the flow, to not have to deal with maybe the struggles or the difficulties or whatever it is that this world throws at us. And so we feel like, man, okay, I know who I am and I know what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm supposed to help people find Jesus, but I just want to live my life and fit in. And Jesus here is reminding you that as a Christian, you are two things. You're called to do two things. You're called to be salty, which means you got to get out and not let this world corrupt you and make this world better. And he says that you're also called to shine bright in this dark and difficult world. Now, why? Because here's the question. I actually had someone ask me this question. They weren't being rude or mean or trying to, cause problems. They go, Stephen, why? Why do I have to make this world better? Why can't I just take care of my life? Stephen, why do I have to point other people to Jesus and tell them about him? I mean, I found out. Maybe they'll find out on their own. I mean, the church is there. Why can't we just wait for them to show? And again, they were not trying to cause problems. They were just saying, why is it so important that we are salt and that we are light? And the answer Jesus gives us is pretty simple, because Jesus did what the law can never do. You see, God had given the Hebrew people the law. It's the 10 Commandments and everything that follows after that explains actually how to live out the 10 Commandments. And it's hundreds of rules, and they cover everything. And sometimes if you've ever tried to read them, you read them and you're like, dude, that's just crazy. I don't even understand what's going on. Why is that a rule? And it is, and it's important because it tells us about who God is, and it tells us what God wants, and it tells us how far we fall short of the holiness of God. And so it tells us all kinds of things. And we sometimes, though, we look at it and we go, hey, I'm glad I don't have to follow that anymore. And we lose sight of why God gave all of those rules to us. Because it's not just to give us rules because God likes rules. In fact, look at what Jesus says in verse 17. He says, don't think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I didn't come to get rid of anything in what we call the Old Testament. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. He goes on to say, for truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or one stroke of a letter will pass away from the law until all things are accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. What is Jesus telling us here? Because he's telling us some stuff that's really important about understanding who God is and who we are. He's reminding us first that the law never goes away. You see, what God gives us in the Old Testament are more than rules. They reflect the very nature and the character of God, and they never change because God never changes. And so if you want to get to heaven on your own, the Bible tells you how to do it. It really does. I mean, it shows you how you in your own power can do it. It tells you that if you follow all the things that God says in both in deed and in thought, right? And not just in your actions, but even in the way you think and even in your intentions. He says you can do it on your own if you do all of this. And anyone who looks at the list would say very quickly, I don't even come close. But Jesus isn't here to say that, hey, it doesn't count anymore. He's saying, listen, I want you to understand that the law never goes away. And I also want you to understand that we are all law breakers. How many of you sinned this morning? You don't have to raise your hands. I know the answer, right? Oh, some of y'all are pointing at other people. That's just wrong. That's a sin. So now, how many of you are sinning in church right now? Right? Those who are pointing at other people, right? I mean, look, we know. You look at what God says in the Ten Commandments, and you know as well as I do that you and I fall so short of the commands. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is a story of this rich young ruler, this young guy who was wealthy and was powerful and was the kind of guy all of us would look at and go, man, you're a great young man. We want our daughters to marry him. He can provide. He can do all this stuff. And you look at this and he comes to Jesus and he goes, Jesus, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus says, follow all the laws. Right? Follow the Ten Commandments and everything that follows after that. And he goes, well, which ones? And Jesus narrows it down to a few. And the guy goes, oh, I've done that. Now, look, that takes some guts to do, doesn't it? To come to Jesus and say I've kept all of these laws. And you might be able to get away with it until your wife or your children or your mama shows up and says, no, let me give you the list of all the laws that he's broken. And when I'll give you a detailed breakout spreadsheet of everything that they've done. But this guy has the courage to look Jesus in the eye and say, Jesus, I've done that. And then what does Jesus say to him? There's one more thing you need to do. Just one more. One more thing and you can earn your way to heaven. And he goes, well, what is it? Sell everything that you have and follow me. Now here's the thing about that, what Jesus says is the Bible at any point in time say it's wrong to be wealthy. It doesn't. Does the Bible at any point in time say that you have to sell all of your possessions if you want to follow Jesus? It doesn't. It doesn't say that, right? At no point in time is that a rule, a command that God has given. God didn't have like the 11th command, take everything that you have and sell it and follow Jesus when he shows up. That's not one of the commandments. So why did Jesus say it? Well, there is another commandment which says you shall have no other gods before me. And what Jesus is showing that man is you may do all the right things on the outside, but your heart is worshiping another God. His name's money. I know that's never a problem in our world, right? That was just back then. He's saying you've got another God, and you're putting him before me because your money is more important to you than I am. And so even in that moment, he's showing this man who we might look at and go, you can't get any better than that. And he's saying, listen, you have broken the law just like the rest of us. But here's the good news, and that is that Jesus fulfilled the law. I want you to think about for a moment this truth that you've heard and you might have even said or talked about before, but I truly believe it's beyond our comprehension to think about the fact that Jesus was truly sinless. Like sinless in every single act. I'm not talking about sinless when people were around. All right, some of y'all are good at being sinless when people are around. I grew up going to church. I know how to play the game. I can look good. I can say all the right things. I can convince everyone I'm better than I actually am because I know what to do when people are around. And it's not, Jesus wasn't just sinless when people were around. He was sinless when no one was watching. And it wasn't just that he was sinless in his actions, right? Because some of y'all are really good people. I look around, I know some of you are like, dude, I know you would say you're not sinless, but you're pretty good and you're a lot closer than I am. And yet, but he wasn't just sinless in action, he was sinless in his thoughts. That's another level, isn't it? Like what he thought, like what do you think when you see certain people? He didn't think that. What do you hope happens when, that maybe happens to someone else or even for your own life? Jesus didn't have that kind of selfishness even in his own thoughts. And not only that, he was sinless in his intentions. Like, have you ever done the right thing for the wrong reason? To look good in front of someone? So maybe God owes you something to get something from God? And Jesus never even sinned that way. He was sinless in every way, shape, or form imaginable. Even though he faced every temptation and every struggle and every difficulty that you and I face, and probably even worse than most of us are ever going to face, and yet he still never, ever chose to sin. And it's because of that Jesus was able to die on the cross to pay for your sins and mine. You see, it's because he never sinned and did not deserve death that when he chose to die, he said, I will pay for the sins of all mankind. And all you have to do is receive the gift that he gave you. How profound is it? How amazing is it that God himself left heaven, became one of us, and said, I'm going to live the life that you should have lived. And then I'm going to take the punishment that you should have received. And today we can stand before him as forgiven because of what Jesus did for us. So why are we salt and why are we light? Why do we make this world better? Because God made my life better. Why do we point people to Jesus? Because Jesus changed my life. And I want you to have the life that I have. I want every person in this world to have experienced the goodness of God in my life. And I want everyone to experience the transformation of Jesus that Jesus gives each and every one of his children. So I am salt and I am light because that's what God did for me. I am salt and I am light because that's what God did for me, and he did it for you, and he did it for all of his children. And that means, listen, that means that we are here to help people find life in Jesus. I don't know what your job is. I know some of you, but I don't know all of you. I don't know what your friend group is like. I don't know what you do to relax or have fun. I have no idea what your life is all about. But here's what I know, that whatever you call yourself, you are first and foremost called to help people find life in Jesus. Wherever you go, whatever you do, whatever you are about, this is our greatest calling. That's what Jesus says. You are salt. You are light. If you are following him, this is what you are. And Jesus is inviting you to be part of his work of redemption, part of his plan to build his kingdom so that one day all may proclaim his great name. And so what that means, what we need to remember is first that Jesus is our hope. Guys, I don't know if we really believe that. I mean, I know we in our head believe it. But do you really believe that he is the hope, the answer to every problem that this world faces? Like, hear me. It's not more education. It's not more money. It's not better politics. It's not the media and the influencers of our world getting their act together. And please hear me. All of those are important. All of those make a difference. But the answer to all of the world's problems are found in Jesus. The answer to hear me, the answer to all of your problems are found in Jesus. No other name, no other place, no other person can do what Jesus can do for you. And when we understand that He is our hope, it changes everything about the way we view our life in this world. Because no longer are we looking for answers in more stuff, in more knowledge, in more relationships. We're just looking for it in Jesus. And if we want to help people find life in Jesus, we need to remember and believe with all of our heart and all of our mind that He is our hope. But we also need to believe that your life matters. Satan has told us a lie, and many of us have bought this lie, that if you don't make a big difference, you're not really making a difference. That if you're not like a Billy Graham who can get up in front of thousands and thousands and then thousands give their life to Jesus, then you're not really making a difference. But the truth is that God says it doesn't matter if you reach thousands or if you reach one. It matters that you're faithful to Him. And a life that is salt and a life that's light and reaches one person for the name of Jesus is a life that's made an eternal difference. Is a life that has made an eternal difference. God's not more impressed with people who speak in front of thousands than the one who just loves their neighbor. I think in the book of Acts, it tells the story of what we call Pentecost, and the Holy Spirit for the first time comes and fills the Christians, the first Christians. And Peter goes out and he preaches, and thousands give their life to Jesus, and everyone's going, how awesome that is. And then a few chapters later, this guy named Philip, who some of y'all may not even know, goes and talks to one person, gets in a chariot and talks to one person about Jesus and gets a chance to lead him to the Lord. Which is more important? They're both the same in God's eyes. And sometimes we need to realize that you loving your neighbor, you being a light at your work, you just maybe making one invitation to someone can make an eternal difference, and you matter to Him, that your life matters. And quit believing the lie that you have to do something big to make a big difference. God says one life at a time. And one life at a time will change more lives than one person trying to do it all. Your life matters, and so because it matters, be consistent. I have a friend who came to me a couple of months ago and goes, man, I've been praying for my friend Steve, and you've been telling me to, and just doesn't seem like anything's happening. And I go, well, how long have you been praying for him? And he goes, 5 weeks. And I go, that's really cute. I did. I mean, like, and I'm snarky, but we have that kind of relationship. And then I took him to someone, another friend of mine. I literally took him to this friend, and he's 90-something years old. He came to know Jesus in his 70s, somewhere around his mid-70s, after his wife had prayed for him since they were teenagers. They got married 15. And she started praying for him. She goes, she would look him right in the eyes and say, man, I really shouldn't have married you. It wasn't honoring of God, but I did it, and so I wasn't going to give up on you once I made the commitment, which is radical in our world, I know. But he goes, she said I wasn't going to give up on you. So she prayed for him every day. Every week she invited him to church. Not in a cruel, you need to come to church with me, but just, hey, you want to go to church with me today, honey? Nah, I don't, grumpy old man, right? He'd tell you that. He'll tell you that today. If I took you to him, he'd tell you the same thing. She'd be reading the Bible. Hey, you want to read this with me? I don't want to do that. And she'd just say, okay. And she'd keep praying, and she'd keep loving. And when he was in his 70s, and this is him telling the story, he goes, one day it dawned on me that I couldn't remember a time when my wife wasn't praying for me, inviting me, and loving me. And if she's willing to do it that long, there must be something to it. And he goes, I started to ask her questions. And I started to read the Bible with her. And I started to go to church with her. And he says, at 70-something years old, I got down on my knees. And he joked, he said, it took me longer to get up than I thought, but I got down on my knees. I relate, I'm 50 and I get that, right? And I prayed and I gave my life to Jesus, and he goes, and he changed me. And she's, as he's telling this story to this young friend of mine, right, who's called to ministry and wants to do all these great things for God, and she's got tears in her eyes. And she goes, what if I'd given up? I mean, after 25 years. Would you have said you're bad, just stopped, she just got tired of it and gave up after? I mean, hadn't she done enough? 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. What if I had given up? And sometimes I think we want the big, powerful, God shows up, and like Peter where he preaches and thousands come to Jesus. And sometimes Jesus might just be saying, would you be consistent? Will you keep praying for your lost child, for your husband or wife, for your coworker? Will you keep showing them God's love in real practical ways? I mean, we do this thing right now, like where will you keep serving one day a month? Will you keep missing one meal and praying for people who don't know Jesus a month? Will you find one person a month that you can just say, I'm going to invite you? And I don't care if you do it for a month and things happen, or if it takes the rest of your life. Will it not be worth it to see the person that you love come to know Jesus? And we need to stop giving up on people and stop giving up because it gets a little harder. It takes a little bit longer than I want it to. And we just need to keep on going. Why? Because Jesus kept going after you. He loved you and died for you, knowing that there was a chance you would say no. So when Jesus comes to us and he says that you're supposed to be salt and you're supposed to be light, it's a reminder that he is the only hope for this world. It reminds us that your life can make a difference. So keep on going and don't ever give up. You can make a difference one life at a time, one person at a time, one relationship at a time. So I challenge you, because this next week is First Saturday Serve. Maybe go out and serve and make the world better. The week after that, we encourage everyone to skip one meal. It's called fasting. One meal, and spend that time just praying for people you know who don't know Jesus. Praying that God opens their heart, praying that they have a moment where they call out to him, praying that God does whatever it takes to draw them to him. And then the next week, invite someone. And I'm convinced that if we would develop this rhythm in our lives, that suddenly we would realize that God can use even someone like us to bring more people to him, because you, my friends, are the salt of the earth. And you, my friends, are the light of the world. Let's point people to Jesus.